Britain. Britain! The land of tea, crumpets, and people who apologise when you bump into them. But how did we get here? Let's take a brief ride through Britain's history, full of battles, beheadings, and an unreasonable amount of rain. We start with prehistoric Britain, where cavemen lived simple lives hunting, gathering, and discovering that we have a thing for hairy women. But this is a little bit too far back, so let's go forward a bit to around 43 AD, when the Romans arrived. So 43 AD, the Romans arrived and said this place could use some straight roads and public baths. So they took over, built some cool stuff, and they left us with Latin words, which we now use to sound fancy. After the Romans got tired and left, Britain became like an Airbnb for invaders. The Anglo-Saxons moved in, bringing their love for storytelling and ridiculous beards. Then the Vikings showed up, demanding loot and occasionally settling down for a nice cup of mead. Then many years later, in 1066, William the Conqueror arrived from France and said, "Right, I'm in..." That's meant to be a French accent. Hang on, let me try this again. "Right, I'm in charge now." At the time, the English weren't very thrilled with this, but William kept things interesting and built lots of fancy castles and made the whole place look, well, a bit French. Now we fast forward to medieval times, where kings fought wars, married their cousins, and struggled with personal hygiene. In 1215, King John was forced to sign the Magna Carta, basically the first time the people told the king, "You're not the boss of me." A modern concept that Britain has since applied to many EU discussions.
Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you?
Then came the big boy, Henry VIII. We've all heard of him. He spent more time getting married than actually ruling, and he was responsible for the Church of England, as he had to create his own subcategory of the church, which would allow him to divorce his wives. Sounds like a lovely bloke. Jumping ahead to the 1700s now, Britain went global. We built an empire so vast that the sun never set, mostly because we had too many colonies to keep track of. Then came the 60s. In the early 60s, Britain was still trying to shake off the post-war blues, but then the Beatles happened, and suddenly Britain was the coolest place on earth. Fashion went wild with mini skirts, mods, and hippies all coexisting, creating a national crisis for dads everywhere who couldn't understand why all their sons suddenly wanted to look like Mick Jagger. Britain embraced a more progressive era. Meanwhile, the government politely asked the USA and USSR to please stop threatening nuclear war because it was making everyone a little bit anxious. The 70s. The economy was not great, there were fuel shortages, constant strikes, and at one point the government introduced the 3-day working week, which sounds fun until you remember it also meant 3-day electricity. The 80s were all about money, power and hair, and the economy bounced back, and suddenly London was full of yuppies, young professionals who wore suits, worked in finance and really wanted you to know about their new BMW. Technology took off, home computers arrived, and British kids everywhere discovered the joy of waiting 30 minutes for a game to load, only for it to crash at the last second. The 90s. The internet arrived.
On your mark, get set. We're riding on the internet, cyberspace set free. Hello, virtual reality.
Interactive appetite, searching for a website, a window to the world, got to get online.
Take a spin, now you're in with the techno set. You're going surfing on the internet.
But of course, this was the 90s, so you had to wait 5 minutes for a single page to load. And God help you if someone picked up the phone if you were online.
Now, Julian, I see you have your computer linked to the telephone line. Can you tell us how you did that?
Yes, well, it's very simple, really. The telephone is connected to the telephone network with a British Telecom plug, and I simply remove the telephone jack from the telecom socket and plug it into this box here, the modem. I then take another wire from the modem and plug it in where the telephone was. I can then switch on the modem and we're ready to go.
Today, Britain is known for its humour, politeness, and eternal debate if a Greggs sausage roll is better than a Greggs steak bake. I just normally buy both, to be honest. And that, dear viewers, is the very condensed history of Great Britain. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need a big, fat cup of tea.